I think so, yeah.
Welcome everybody to this webinar about digital sales and operations planning in times of financial unrest. My name is Stefan Karlöf. I'm editor-in-chief of Supply Chain Effect magazine. I've been working with Optimity as a partner and advertiser for many, many years. And we've done a lot of seminars, webinars, and other things over the years. So this webinar is a cooperation between us. The magazine Supply Chain Effect actually started 10 years ago, so we celebrate our 10-year anniversary this year. And I think Optimity has been one of our most loyal partners since the start, actually.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you.
Eric, can you start by telling us about who you are and what Optimity does?
Well, who am I? Well, I'm on a personal basis, but let's focus on the professional side. So I've been at the supplier side of planning software for the whole professional career since 2000. Actually, it started at Intensia, who at the time had recently acquired a planning software called PMSIM. So I did find that really interesting to work in that space because of the complexity of planning. You never know exactly what the demand is. You never know exactly what is going to happen. I think that's what I like about planning. Other people like CRM or purchase orders or whatever, but for me that's just plain stuff. I like the complexity of planning, so that's why I worked with that. So I worked with that. I worked at Intensia and IFS, which is both business softwares. But always I had sort of, even though if I had management roles and different ways of working, I've always sort of, planning has been my main expertise area and always tried to kept it like that. Since 7 years working for Optimity. And yes, to sort of on the topic of what in terms of planning and so on, I tried to optimize my mathematically optimize my first factory back in 2003. Mm-hmm. And yeah, can really see a difference in it. I think it took 2 days to run the optimization at that time, and a similar optimization today would take 5 to 10 minutes. So we can really see how the technology has increased the possibility of assisting business, and I think that's really interesting. So yeah, and I guess that's one of my key drivers here, Stefan. It's really that the how can technology assist business in getting better. And especially interesting now when there's no sports on TV or anything, so then you have to focus on something else, I guess. So that's otherwise sports is pretty interesting as well for me. So that's a bit about me, Stefan. Yeah.
There's happened a lot within technology. We won't dive into that now, but there's been a technological revolution really that makes this possible now to plan in a completely different way.
I would say so.
Patrik, you've been a client to Optimity for many years. And you previously worked at Orkla, and that's how we advertised you here. But now you have a different role. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And comparing with you, Eric, I can say that planning has also been a red thread through my career, but more from the industry or from the business side. And I try to choose company that has product that I like to consume. So I started my career working with chocolate within Kraft for some years, and then it was almost 10 years within Coca-Cola. And I must say that I'm very fascinated about the whole planning area and everything you can do and everything you can monitor and control. If you really understand how to make good plans, you can make also really good financial result in a company. So I think it's a very interesting area. And I see a little bit about the people who joined in the meeting. I think most of you knew about Goldratt, for example, and that was also a person I started to read and listen to when I started my career, about his theory of constraints and how you can balance different things with service level, cost in production and capital tied up. So I think that has been something that I have been focusing a lot during my career in different companies and in different roles.
Great, and I will tell everybody in the audience now that we will have some possibility for questions in the end of this session. So now we will move on to the webinar and the content of it. It's impossible right now not to talk about the current situation with COVID-19 and the pandemic, and certainly when we focus on S&OP. Patrik, how do you think you should navigate and act when it comes to S&OP when things are changing rapidly and when we are in times of disruption like right now?
Yeah, because it's a very special time that we are into right now. And if I take my personal situation, I live in Norway, and I think Norway have shut down their society much more than in Sweden. So if I take my wife, for example, she has been working at home for 10 weeks. So I mean, it's a really huge test now how everything is. Can you work from home for such a long time and also create value in a company? And we have shown that step by step that it's possible, but it's big changes. And I would say within 3-4 areas on the demand side, for me that work in fast moving consumer goods, you can see huge variations now. People go and shop in retail, they have different behavior. The service sector has slowed down a lot. So it's very challenging for everyone that works with demand forecasting to predict and say, okay, what kind of products will we sell? It's also a problem with sourcing of material. Many companies have international supply chains. They source products maybe from Asia and it's not possible. They have to change their bill of materials, their recipes. And it's also that, I mean, this with the people work remote. Some people get sick, they don't come to work. So the capacity with people working in factories are also unsecure. So, I mean, it creates a huge need for good planning and, I mean, to have a good process for how do you deal with your demand and supply situation in a company, and how is that process working now? It's a huge stress test, you can say, during this period to see how good are your planning principles and processes in the company.
Erik, how would you say that? Can you explain how Optimity can be of service and how you could perhaps help organizations
I can help Patrik. No, I can't say.
To get a better picture of what's happening and understanding and planning and so on.
Yeah, I mean, Patrik was mentioning the digitalization and the key to that, and I think that's where we come in. I mean, that's really where we work in trying to create automated plans, trying to make sure you get as much as possible done without really having to do it yourself. It's only when it comes to the details you're alerted by things are going wrong, and then you go in and change the details. Otherwise, you have to try to lift your perspective and look at different views. And I think I can just show you a bit in terms of how it can look. That's my script anyway. So yeah. So I mean, generally Optimity, this is Optimity. We use dashboards to try to visualize what is happening in a given situation. How is the current forecast, for example, affecting our delivery service? What's the key performance indicators giving this particular plan? What's the load in different lines? How is the stock developing over time? Then this is one example of a dashboard where you can really get a picture of the future based on the current demand scenario. I will talk a bit more about demand planning, but this is just another example of how you can visualize and look at different situations where I can see certain products being really high in stock, and I can see how certain replenishment, the blue areas here, are really building to stock when I'm manufacturing. This is what I'm actually supplying. You can have key indicators such as this when you see that, well, actually, what line is causing problem for me? I can see that I have some lost sales based on certain lines, and I can see I have problems there. I can see if I have available capacity in certain lines or not. So it's all about visualizing where are the problems at the moment to try to quickly solve the operational problems while trying to also work on the demand side. So looking more to demand, because I think that's interesting, and I think Patrik was saying that as well. We need to sort of, what is the impact of people? The countries are closing down in a different way and are doing different things. And what's the impact of that? If previously a lot of the forecasting was made on statistical views, and we would be using sort of overviews to show how you have outliers and we will have exceptions and focus on statistical forecasting. I think these days it's a lot about getting easy access for sales guys, business people So how for them to change their forecast? This is actually a forecast view within demand planning where you can easily select a product segment, for example, and see the total values, total forecast, compare that against previous sales and operational cycles, look at how that sort of reflects against previous budgets, etc. Quickly see changes here. You could go into details on an individual product, and you can click around here and see how they are changing. Take the wrong products there. But that's one perspective. If you are working more simplistic, maybe out in the market, well, maybe you would like to see everything on a product group level. So you can view all your demand history or demand and future forecast based on product category like this. And quickly, if you want to go in and update the values on this particular level, meaning it's easy for the salespeople to do changes and adjustments to the forecast. And I think that's important when it comes to this situation. Maybe a move from having demand planning more centrally to be able to involve the market, because if you're closing down completely in Norway and only closing down half in Spain, or I mean, that's not the case, but in Sweden, for example, well, the demand profile is going to be different in the different countries. So you have to move the responsibility for demand planning out to the regions closer to the market and get their values. That's
Right.
At least.
Can I ask you a question, Erik? It looks great, but if you compare, I mean, you have been working with this for a very long time. If you compare a project that you run today compared to 10 years ago, how is it different? Is it very complicated or to set up this in a company or with a system, or what's different today compared to 10 years ago?
I would say the speed in data handling. I mean, from a technical point of view, the speed in data handling and calculations are getting a lot faster. So it's more easy to do the advanced stuff and getting that into place. In terms of how we meet with the customers and so on, I would say it's still that we actually have to challenge the customers to go in a certain direction. I would like our customers and future prospects to challenge us in a more way, have more clear thoughts on what they would like to do. But obviously it's easy today. We have a clear, it's easier to integrate towards the system. It's easier to get the solutions up and running, and we do more advanced stuff today. I mean, looking at we have different profiles here I can view. I mean, I have a business manager here maybe, and the business manager would like to see something. He might want to see promotional impact, for example. So we have added a lot of capabilities in how to put in promotions and how you can do that, how the system would analyze and take away a promotion effect when you calculate forward. We have added a lot of those things. There's a lot more involved in phasing in and phasing out, so you can get that more correct. So I would say what happened in the last 10 years is we are more accurate. We are dealing with what happens. We're trying to reflect really what you're doing out there. And based on that, we're getting more accuracy out of the forecast. Implementations times are similar, I would say, but yeah.
Can I ask you, Erik, in an extreme, unique situation like right now, can you really depend on the historical data, or will the algorithms and machine learning be fooled?
Yeah, that's a good question. We put in some thought into that, but actually, it's in demand forecasting, we typically had some things that are a bit strange anyway. We had something that we call an event, and for example, Easter is one of these events where actually you will have a peak in demand for certain companies during certain time, but you all know Easter is moving around all the time. It's end of March, end of April, so it's moving. So what we see here is that really when the COVID-19 and how it closes down, it can really be considered to be an event. For Norway is one event, and for Sweden is one event. And when we put a timestamp of this event, and based on how you close down a country, for example, you can put in different events. And what the system will do, it will simply analyze what the difference has been in the time period of the event. It will take that effect away and calculate based on the previous values. So when we when the COVID-19 is over, it would go back more to the normal state, and then actually it will save the effects of the event in each country. So yeah, save us for that. But if COVID-20 comes in, you can actually take the effects of demand back for certain product. But I would hate to see that, of course.
So next time we have a pandemic, we can just bring that back, and we can work with that event. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Perfect.
If the likelihood of similar procedures, obviously the closing down has to be similar and so on, but you can have different categories of that. So, but anyway, we can easily come back to the previous situation when it's more normal.
I would like to add one thing, just working with you, Optimity. I mean, we have been working together in different projects and different companies over the years, and normally when you work with the consultants, they know a lot about their systems and how to navigate in the system and what to do. So, but what I really appreciate with you guys is that you know also a lot about planning. So we can have good discussions about different planning situations. You have a good base of skills when it comes to planning, both within demand planning and production planning, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Patrik.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, Patrik, now with the volatility that we see, it's increasing and it's done so for many, many years. Shouldn't companies work with scenario planning all the time? Now many companies do it right now, but shouldn't you do that continuously?
Absolutely, and we haven't been talking so much about S&OP, but to have an S&OP process or an IBP process or whatever you call it, it's very good just to have a process, even if it's not 100% working. It's just good to have those forums, to have the possibility to take decision jointly, and if you have a system where you can simulate different scenarios, so it's very, very useful. And in those times that we have today, if you take, for example, I heard that chewing gum, for example, have dropped down to 20-30% in volume, and makeup and all that sector has really dropped down. I mean, it's extremely hard to judge the demand situation as we go forward, and if you don't have a good solid process for that in your company, it's very, very difficult to handle those situations. I would say it's more than ever important in those tough days that we have now to have good and solid processes for planning, S&OP, and where you can take decisions based on how everything are moving week by week now.
Patrik, just a question from me to you there.
Yeah.
I mean, if we are seeing an increased, are you seeing the same as us with it's more important getting the key account managers, the product manager involved in demand forecasting these days, or how is your perspective on that?
Yeah. It's very much, as I said, a matter of giving good feedback also. If they can get good feedback on what's the result on this volume, and if we had bad information, we can't do a good job. If you can give that feedback based on fact in system and different scenarios, it's much easier to get them involved and to get them to feed in accurate data, because they want to do a good job and they want to perform, but you have to give them facts and figures.
Erik, you will show us now how to do this kind of scenario planning in reality. Can you go ahead?
Oh, yeah, we'll try to do that. Yeah. So I will just share my screen again, because I think that's what I have to do. So let's bring up a scenario here. Use a similar dashboard as before, where we actually are looking at the bottleneck. So let's consider yourself being in a factory here now, or looking at a factory where we would have certain bottleneck report where we look at the load for certain lines here. So we can see it's pretty much utilized here. We can see some key performance indicators here. What's the cost with this particular scenario? What's the delivery performance? So I can see that I'm not able to really meet up with my demand at the moment. So someone has provided a forecast to me that I can't really meet, and I can see where the challenge is, and I can actually look at the details as well. So how much quantity am I missing at the moment? So this is the starting position at the moment. And this delivery is based on the forecast as being seen here. Obviously, as before, I can drill down and work with this in a pivot view, so I can I can group it by product group, and I can look at the details like this, and if I would like to. So now I see the totals of different bread categories here, and the total demand volumes and how much I can deliver. And I can see the products that I'm not able to deliver. If I wanted to see specifically the ones that I can't deliver, I could easily filter them out like this as well. So demand not met in terms of forecasting, and that could be interesting. Obviously, you put priorities and you have different benefits of selling different things. So now I can see that I have some problems selling the buns, and especially the gourmet brioche bun here is having some delivery problems. This is demand, and I can't deliver anything. It's a delivery service of 0%. So this is a way of finding out where I will have my problems. But how would I go about simulating what to do in this situation? Well, I know this is the load, so I have a pretty high load on certain lines, the line 3 and line 2. What if I go to a more detailed view here to review the line 2 and line 3? I can see, you will start to learn if you work with it, but I can see I have a base shift here of around 50 hours per week. This is on a weekly level. It could be daily or monthly, whatever. So I have a 50 hours available, and I'm running a certain operation time, meaning I plan to use all of that time. You can see it's green all over. It's 100% utilization. Similarly for line 3 here, I have a base shift over there and capacity available, and it's green all over. So I'm using all of that capacity. But what if I can actually have the capabilities of performing overtime? So I have defined a predefined shift that was 50 hours available. Could go in here and change the numbers, or I could actually just open up this overtime. Or what I will do in this particular scenario is I will tell the system, you know what it costs to bring in this overtime or work double shifts or whatever it is. So I selected the blue decision flag here. So it's actually now being able to choose overtime if it thinks it's worth it. And I will do the same for line 3 here as well. So I'm pressing that, it's going to update here as well. So now I have the blue decision flag here. And when I now run the optimization, it will look at my demand, it will look at my production capacity, how I manufacture products, it will look at the material if that's available, and it will create a new plan. And that particular plan, if I want to, I can just open up a new dashboard here, and it will show me the result of this particular new plan. So based on the fact that the system were allowed to use overtime or extra capacity on line 2 and line 3, it actually is possible now to go up to 99.7% in delivery performance. So that seems like a sound decision. But then again, yeah, being a supply chain director, you obviously have to, what is it that we needed, or maybe a production manager or whatever you are. So then you can go back into this report, you can update and see what the system is suggesting, because obviously this is a system suggestion or what the system thinks you should do given the cost, given the delivery performance, etc. And if we look at line 2 here, well, it's still using the base shift, of course. That's because that's the cheaper shift, and then it's using maybe that's difficult. Maybe it's difficult to put in 34 hours in next week as an overtime. So maybe I should have just closed that down. Maybe I should have been like this. Close all of these periods down. That's my decision. Then it seems like it's using quite a lot of time over here. Maybe it would have been using more time if I close that with this one down. So based on this, I really take certain decision, and it gets highlighted where I need to take these decisions. So you can simulate what capacity you should have, but not only that. I mean, going back here to the demand view, taking away the fact that we filtered out the ones that we didn't meet before. Maybe as well, I've heard some news that it could be a change in the baguettes is gonna go down or whatever in that assortment. I could select here. I could go in and I could change this here. This could be a separate version. It doesn't have to be the live version. I can copy this, the simulation version, and then I can add whatever 200%. There's a lot of percentage. Seems to be the French seems to be getting back from the lockdown, so they're eating the baguettes now. So now we increase the demand quite a lot here, and yeah. similarly, we do simulation again, and we see what the result is from this simulation with this new demand. And yeah, it's getting done there. So then I can update this dashboard and get a perspective of where I am at the moment and what I need to do. And obviously these dashboards, this is one example of a dashboard, highly configurable. You can look at all aspects of this. And once again here now, when we increase the demand like this, well, it's obviously reflected in the dashboard, but we see the delivery service is going down again. If I would highlight here and update the screen here, I would see, yeah, most likely we have some problems in delivering the baguettes here. Yeah, the large white baguette here is going down to very low delivery percentage. So being able to, I mean, and this is just a few scenarios here, but being able to simulate, okay, what can I get from the supplier? Because in these days, I mean, as Patrik, as you mentioned, suppliers from China, are you getting any of that, or are you getting just a small portion of that because it needs to be restricted? And then you can put restrictions on the supply side and see how you can utilize the supply you have. Yeah. If you are getting problems with, probably not getting problems with storage capacity in these days, but probably delivery capacity sometimes. You're not able to drive as much or send as many trucks as before. So then you can simulate those aspects as well.
And capital can be a constraint also in those days. Many companies are running out of cash. But one comment to what you just showed, Erik, is that frequency is very important. So I mean, many of you that work with forecast knows that the forecast is never so good or accurate as you want. But I mean, even with a bad forecast or not so accurate forecast, even if you can run the plan more frequently, you detect the problem much faster and you can see where you have problems and you can work with different scenarios. I think just to be able to run and simulate things much more frequent, that is very valuable, even if the forecast isn't improving really. So that's, yeah.
Erik and Patrik, thank you. Would you say that most companies work with a practical S&OP in this manner today, or is this unusual still to work with this kind of tool, the Optimity tool?
I would say most companies have some sort of process for how they deal with their demand and planning situation, but many companies that I meet focus very much on today and this week and maybe next week. They don't work in advance, so they don't really know what will happen within 5 or 10 weeks or so, and that's a strength to be able to say that I can see now that in middle of August we will run out of this material, or we need an extra shift in the end of August or so. So I mean, to be able to work on different time horizons, not to work just here and now, but to be able to detect problem and issues on some months horizon, that can be very, very good. I think to be able to do that, you need some sort of tool and system. You don't detect that in Excel or with a paper and pen so easily.
I would agree to that, and the fact that the shifting focus a bit from the operational, what you do every day, to the long term, actually make sure that the operational will run a lot smoother. So if you can move your focus away, if you can work further away, but yeah, and I agree with Patrik as well. But what we see is that a lot of people have the processes, they have the meeting structures, they take decision. It's a lot more based on gut feel these days, which I think is right as well. It will always be a gut feel decisions anyway, but it should be based on knowledge from simulations, sort of that you try different scenarios. What happens if we go there? What happens if we go there? And I think that's a key thing.
Being fact-based, but agile at the same time.
Yeah.
And also for those guys who are working with planning, it makes their life so much easier. I mean, they will be more secure, and they will know. And I mean, many persons that have responsibility for planning today are under a lot of stress, and they really don't know, and they're just running around. And if they have some help and some tool and a good process and so, I mean, it will be a lot easier for them to predict what will happen, and yeah.
I agree, and I've seen cases, not mentioning anyone here, but where they are planning in a long-term perspective, and they're actually seeing that their program or what they see in the future is actually above capacity 20%. Yet they're deciding on the steering group level, we have to do this. And yeah, what happens 3 to 6 months later? Yeah, they're in a huge challenge, and they have backlogs, and they have. So I mean, if you can't, I mean, a planning software can't add capacity. I mean, it can't make you produce more. So you see the situations. Either you have to think, or have to accept the fact that the pace is going to be slower. Otherwise, you will run into problems anyways. I think that's more of a management tasks in relation to that. But you have to accept where you are as well.
But it's also it's easy to think that within planning that how hard can it be? I mean, it's a demand, it's a supply, and just go on with it. But it's so many techniques and things you can classify your product different way, and you can lot size them in different way, and you can work on different horizons and so on. So I mean, it's a lot of techniques and tools and smart things that you can use that can ease up the situation. Absolutely.
So the clear advice is get a planning software, whether it's Optimity or not. You can do a lot by using these tools.
I think the tools is one thing, but I think be open to technology. Be open to how that can assist you today. It has happened a whole lot the last 20 years. The speed and the simulation capability. Be open to what that can give you. Don't be afraid of it. Yeah, sure, you're gonna have one bump in the road when you're going to implement it or whatever, but I mean, 20 years back you had 20 bumps. Now it's one bump, and you're gonna get there. I mean, we see an increasing amount of customer go in this direction, and I mean, to the audience out here as well, I would like to challenge you. What would you really like to have to be able to do a smooth planning process for tactical and long-term planning? What would take you to a position where you actually could find the perfect plan? I mean, I'm too often I'm finding myself trying to preach to my customers and others how they should do it, but really I would like someone to challenge me. This is what I need for the future. This is what I see before me, and then we can see if we can cope up with that. I mean, that would be really interesting to hear a lot more ideas in this area. So that's what I would like to push for. And then of course they would pick Optimity once they are starting to get there, but that's that's just what I think anyway.
We can ask the participants now, because I think that we should move on to our Q&A here and the discussion. So if we have any of you wanting to put some questions to Patrik and Erik, please go ahead now.
I can start to ask you a question, Erik, and that's about integration. When you work with those kind of tools and system, APS systems and so on, what about how do you integrate that with your ERP, MRP? How is that today compared to 10 years ago?
No, yeah, it's getting a lot easier. I mean, in a lot of aspects, a lot more technologies that way you can replicate out data, you can bring it in quickly, and I mean, I think from a system perspective, you built up a lot of more frameworks to handle data. It's not about just taking this particular field to that particular field. You have a framework in between, so you can change the data, you can tweak it so it actually suits planning. I know working in the past, having actually working with the ERP players, the system were connected. There was the same system, but they always took the data from that particular field. And if you didn't place the data in the right field, then it was impossible to plan. So it has gotten a lot easier now, and it's a flexible integration settings.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you can start to work with the system as a standalone application if you just to try out, and then you can bring over data and work with it as standalone. And I mean, so there are different steps and different ways to work with integration
and run them in parallel. And there's a lot of trials going on as well, where you start up testing a system, and if you don't think it's suitable, then you just shut it down.
Okay. Questions?
Patrik, if we take a little more broad perspective of this with COVID-19 and the pandemic, and not just the planning perspective, but the supply chain perspective. How do you think this will change how companies build the supply chain in the future? We're talking a lot now about risk. That risk management in the supply chain is like getting a renaissance and coming back.
Yeah.
Do you have any input on that?
Yeah, I think it will change a lot. And you say it takes like 60 days to change your habit. And I mean, we have been in this situation more than 60 days. And I think people will change the way that they work and meet and run meetings and travel and things like that. But also, it's a lot of discussions now about to have international supply chains. And if you have local sourcing, if you have companies working with a more that you have a supply chain that are more close to your home or to your country, can you source your products from close to where you are, or do you have to go to Japan or to US or China and source things, or can you do it from the Nordic countries or from Europe at least? So I think we will see a lot of changes, and where you will value to have things to mitigate risks in a different way. I think that will be a theme for many years. And I mean, there will be different things happening now as we go forward. So I don't think this situation is over now. I think it will be more surprises during the year.
We will see more inventory, more in stock. People say that we have been too lean for too long. Not being able to have the capacity that's necessary.
Yes and no, I would say, because many companies are now very afraid to run out of cash. So I mean, so they try to run with smaller inventories, but then it's more difficult to predict to see where will we sell and in which channels will we have products, and I think also what we have seen, Erik, in the past when we run project, that it's possible to run factories and so with good service and also to reduce inventories at the same time. You can do that if you do it in a controlled way, but then you have to know what you're doing. You can't just reduce your inventory, but if you do it in a smart way, it's always possible.
And I think that's a relevant thing there as well, but what's the organization around, if you do it in a smart thing, you say, what's the organization around this improvement changes? If you have planners focusing on the operational stuff, if you have senior staff focusing on strategical, who is really dealing with the fact that you have to be smart and consider how you develop stock over time, and so we have to move into this so-called master planner role and have people thinking on how to improve things. And of course, that's not for everyone. If you have a smaller company, you can't afford that maybe. But if you're starting to be 500 million SEK or more in revenue, you can have those people there. You almost need to have it there.
Yeah.
So we will see more advanced and more ambitious S&OP because of the pandemic, because of this crisis.
Absolutely, I think so.
Thank you so much, both of you. And Erik, it looked very, fun when you did that, all the optimization in the program. So you have to give me a demo one of these days. And so I can try it myself.
Sure, I will. And naturally, I can demo it for anyone else here as well.
That's fine. And anybody can, of course, reach out to you if they have any additional questions or something they want to discuss. So with that, I thank our participants, and I thank you for a very good conversation.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Bye-bye, everyone. Okay.